Please excuse me, I've got rather a bad throat at the moment, so I'll do my best to try and speak up. What I'm going to do today is connect up the SFR1 to my computer, to the BIA Sound Teacher software, and see if we can configure all of these lights. So let's plug that in first. Which goes in there. I will need to turn on my transmitter, otherwise I'm going to be deafened by the volume control. That's working. Let's switch her on. The rotary beacons, unfortunately, when you first power them, they go into rotating mode. It's a shame. I wish they were, when you first power them, just turn that down a bit, save me shouting. It'd be nice when you first powered them that they were in the off state like that. Very strange signal switching on them. You have to use a 3-position switch to get them to work. Anyway, steering, that's this side. Yep, steering's still working. Cruise control's working. Handbrake. And emergency stop. That's good. So all of that's working. So what I need to do now is go into the Sound Teacher software, set up all the outputs to assign them to the different lights, and then send that configuration to the truck. So I've updated the software in Sound Teacher, and I'll show you some screen grabs of that in a minute, by assigning all the different lighting outputs to the respective channels that they're connected to. And I've added a few functions to the software as well, so that stick movements on the transmitter control things on the truck, which I'll also show you in a minute. Everything's working okay. Just going to switch on. Talk about those in a minute, those flashing lights. Cab light. Door shut. Engine starts. And you've got running lights on the front ×4. And the cab logo. These lights are strange. I've got them assigned to this 3-way switch here, which somebody kindly told me that was how you control them. But it's a shame that when you power up the machine they start working. It would have been nice to be able to have them in the off position, and I have to move this switch up and down a number of times before I get them to switch off. If anybody's got any bright ideas on how better to configure those, I'm all ears. So anyway, they're off for the moment. We've got the running lights, we've got the logo. Let's shut that down for a minute. Excuse me a second, I just need to blow my nose. Safe, keep sniffing. I've got dual rates on my transmitter with a switch A at the end here. So I'll turn this round now. This one controls the lights, which is dipped headlights. and main beam puts on all the spots as well. If I run the low rate, it drops them back off again. So that's the lights. So I'm just looking through my little list that I've got here. On the low rate on this side, I've got a flash of lights as well. You want to flash somebody, got that one. On the high rate on that side is the hazards. Show you the back end in a minute. Our side repeaters are working on the sides. The only other lights still to fit are the two little marker lights on the side down here. I much prefer using dual rates because it makes the controls so much easier and straightforward. Horn can obviously go a lot louder, but I'm keeping it down so you can hear me. You can put as many horns on here as you like. Silly horn if you want it. Steering obviously on this channel, which controls the indicators as well, look. Indicators and so on, looking down my list. So, need to just look at the reverse lights, so I'll just swap it around for a second so you can see the back. Move that over there, should hopefully be in focus still. To get the rear lights on, we just need to put the first stage of lights on. Like so. Now to show the brake lights, you can't see, but the drives are actually turning at the moment. If I apply the brakes, you can see the brake lights. You can vary how long those lights stay on for. They're on a fraction longer than I actually want, so I might turn them back down a bit. Change of direction will put the reversing lights and indicators on, so you can see all of those are working as well. I don't know whether you can see, but if you look inside there, you can see that the dash lights are on. When the headlights go off, as they have done at the moment, you can see that there is no, so it's consistent with how lights would normally come on a vehicle. When you put your headlights on, your dash lights up as well. Anything else in there that I haven't told you about? I've got gears on here. We're in gear 1 at the moment, gear 2, gear 3, gear 2, gear 1. This one here, D, controls the cruise control on and off. At the moment you'll see I'm not touching this. It's running on cruise control. Until you bring it to a complete halt. If I flick that switch now, we're now on general operation. So there's your cruise control as well. That one there, C, will be, or is allocated to the boom control, which obviously needs to be, that's going to be the next job, is fitting that. And I've just noticed something there. I had to turn it on its side earlier. Must have caught that. But I need to put some more glue on it. That's it for that. I'll just show you a few screenshots now. Okay, so you've connected everything and run setup. Your motor should turn and brake to a stop, and your steering should work. But how do you get the lights to work? Well, here's how. There are a few basic things you need to do. One is assign your wiring connections in the Outputs tab. This tells the SFR1 what's connected where. Number two, set up the light switch tab, or review what's already there in the light switch tab. This is the incremental order in which your lights will follow. And then number three, assign control. In other words, you will use one of your proportional channels, channel 3, channel 4, and you will assign an action to one of those stick positions to switch the lights on, and another position to switch the lights off. And then finally, save it in the software and upload it to your truck. And that will be it, job done. This is the Outputs tab. If you notice, it's under Configuration on the top tab line, then Outputs, and Outputs again. You'll see that there are outputs 1 to 8 and then 9 to 16. These will correspond to what you've written on your wiring diagram. This is from my truck, but yours will be pretty similar, I would have thought. It just depends where you've put the wires. So, for example, in my case, I connected the low beam headlights to output number 1 and to output number 9, because they went either side of the board into the AKL8s. And then I did the same with the high beam. I connected the high beam headlights to number 2 and to number 10. This is why it's so important. You need to write down what you've connected to what, and now you transfer that information to this particular tab here. As I said a minute ago, it allows the BIOS software to know what's connected to what, and the clue is in the word output. If you want to output the low beam, it knows that it needs to do that on channels 1 and 9. If it wants to operate or you ask it to operate the indicators, it knows that will be output 5. It's as simple as that. You'll notice there's a column called intensity, and everything's at 100 apart from output 14, which is a special one, combined rear light, or anybody in the motor trade, a stop and tail. That's obviously a combined rear light and a brake light. The intensity you'll see I have set at 30%, and then in option 1, 100, option 2 we don't use. Option 1, it will be the maximum brightness when the second call comes in. So that effectively means that it will run at 30% ordinarily, but then when you ask for brake lights, it will go up to 100%. You can play with those figures, but I tend to, well, I've done a few of these, and I tend to find 30% is just about right for the rear lights, and then the 100% for the brake lights to come on. That's it, that's that tab. You don't need to save anything. We're then going to move on to the light switch tab, which is just 2 along from where you are now. This might look a little daunting or scary, but honestly it isn't. It is merely a set of steps that the program will go through to put your lights on and take your lights off for you. You will start with step 0 at the bottom, and the software will do everything that's in that horizontal line for step 0. So in other words, by default, when you start the machine up, your running lights will come on. That's why there's a black dot in there. Nothing else will come on except for reversing lights possible, brake lights possible, and indicators possible, because obviously even without your lights you still need to have reversing lights, brake lights and indicators. Step 1 will be your first action with the light switch, so you move the control to put your lights on, and you'll notice that there is a dot against low beam headlight. So in other words, your first action will be to put the low beam headlights on. Then in step 2, not only will the low beam come on, but also the high beam. And then in step 3, as well as those two, the front fog light will come on. And when you use the reverse action to turn your lights off, it will merely cycle backwards. So it'll first turn off the front fog lights, then the high beam, then the low beam, back to step 0. You can play with that as much as you like. You can add more steps to it if you want on the right there. You can get other things to come on with various steps of the light, as you can see in the columns, but I'm just keeping this basic for the moment. That's what I do, and it's quite straightforward. Now the third thing we have to do is we have to assign the lights plus and lights minus to a spare channel. I'm using prop 3, which is the left stick horizontal movement to the left and to the right. And you'll notice in there, in the middle of the 3 columns at the bottom, you can see light switch plus and light switch minus. Now, this can be a bit confusing, so I'll try and put it across in a, excuse me, in the easiest way I can think. The way the beer is set up, it can recognise a half a stick movement. Let's just stick from centre to the left, shall we? It can recognise a half stick movement to the left, and it can recognise a full stick movement to the left. So that's 2 action points, if you like. Into the bargain, when you move into any one of those 2 positions, it also runs a timer. It will recognise a short in position, which is 1.5 seconds, and it'll recognise a long in position, which is 3 seconds. So that's 4 action points. So you've got 4 action points just on the left of your one stick, 4 action points just on the other side. So that's theoretically 8 actions you could assign just to that one axis. Across 2 axes, you're looking at 16 things that you could assign. But believe you me, it gets very complex if you start doing that. If you've got a multiple channel transmitter receiver, I would strongly suggest you use dual rates, and then you don't need to worry about the sort of half in position. You just use the full in position and let the transmitter work out which one it is. For example, let's take the light switches to their C and D. If I move the stick fully to the left for 1.5 seconds, the light switch comes on. And that first one, if you remember in order, would be to put the headlights on. If I centered it again and then moved it again, it would then put the high beam on. And if I did the same thing again, it would put the spotlights on, so on and so forth. To turn them off, you move the dual rate switch, which is the same as doing a half a stick, remember? So that's line C in here. So the light switch is, the command now is light switch minus. So when you move the stick all the way to the left for 1.5 seconds, it cycles backwards, so it turns the spots off. And then the next time it turns off the headlights, and the next time it turns off the dip beam, till you're back to start again. So that's why they're in the short in position. You could put things in the long in position if you want. If you do that, you've got to remember that you need to time how long you hold the stick for. For example, the light switch at the bottom, we talked about moving it all the way to the left for 1.5 seconds, puts the lights on. If you were to put something in D on the right hand side, long in position, let's suppose, for argument's sake, you put a horn in there. If you hold that switch in position for 3 seconds rather than 1.5 seconds, the beer system would activate the long in position command, so it would sound the horn. So you see, it can get a bit confusing. Best to start off simple and then work your way up. The left hand side, incidentally, in position static, is purely for on off, switching something on off. My prop channel 4, which is the vertical shift axis on the right hand stick, you'll notice I've got hazard lights, a couple of horns at the bottom, and a function sequence 2, which is actually flashing the headlights. When you've done all of this, you need to save it and you need to update the SFR1. Doesn't matter which way around you do it, but the blue icon will save the software so that when you close it and reopen it, it's back where you are now. And don't forget the transfer project data, or use your SD card if that's what you're doing to update the truck. And that's it. Your lights should work. It's a good starting point. As the old saying goes, try not to run before you can walk. There is a huge potential for configuration within the beer using things like function sequences, which in effect is a macro. It's a series of commands. You'll be familiar that I've got a macro set up to start up the unit. When you switch it on, you hear somebody walk into the door, open the door, interior light comes on, door shuts, light goes out, engine starts. You know, there's half a dozen different things there, and they're all done automatically. So you see, there's quite a lot of potential for you to do all sorts of things. But start off, you know, if you're new to this, just start off with the basics and build on it. And remember the old thing that if you make a mistake with something, just quit out of the software without saving it, and then it'll come back to the old, the previous version. And then if you run project data update again, it'll revert the SFR1 back to the previous version as well. So you know, it's quite safe to mess with as long as you understand the rules. And if you go and save something that you've done wrong, you've got to live with it, I'm afraid, and correct it. So that's it. I hope you found that useful.